Okay, so in this installment of the art and artists that I have on the list, I'll be going over the numbers 46, starting with William Turner or J.M.W. Turner, all the way through number 60, the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. So let's talk about Turner. First and foremost, the only painting of his that I have in the PowerPoint is Shipwreck of the Minotaur that you can see here, showing a obvious shipwreck of some sort of a ship known as the Minotaur. But foolishly, when I put this together, I didn't even include in the PowerPoint the two most common paintings mentioned for Turner. And so we're going to take a look at those now. And so here we go. And it would be the Fighting Temeraire. That comes up much more. Hopefully you can see what's going on there. And so it shows a ship being towed to be parted out or taken apart, as it were. I think the ship was involved in the Battle of Trafalgar, in which Lord Nelson, Horatio Nelson, defeated the Allied forces of the French and led by Villeneuve, but nevertheless, that's neither here nor there. And then the other one that he is noted for, probably comes up the most, is what you see here, rain, steam, and speed. So that is what we have there for Turner. So we continue on going through various items, and we have Jacques-Louis David, who comes up quite a bit, and whose painting is one of his paintings, the model for our Quizbowl shirt for Eastside High School. He is a neoclassicist, and so therefore, as you obviously can tell, influenced by the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome, but in a new style. He is the painter of the French Revolution and Napoleon. So let's take a look at some of his items. You have the Oath of the Horatii. This, of course, shows a scene from Roman history under the King Titus Tatius, in which the three triplets that are Roman, the Horatii, are going to be fighting against a group of triplets from Alba Longa. And they're all giving an oath, obviously, to fight unto the death to their father that you see here. Then you have as the next one, the Death of Socrates. This is the painting upon which the back of our Quizbowl t-shirt. It shows a scene in which Socrates is about to grab hold of the hemlock. He has been condemned to death. The great Platonic dialogue, the Apology, is obviously the dialogue of his trial, and the dialogue Crito is the dialogue that would have this scene in which he is talking to Socrates about death and the nature of justice and those sorts of things with his circumstances. And so you see all the supporters and friends of Socrates all sad as he, pointing upwards, is about to take the hemlock into his right hand. We move on to the death of Marat. This, of course, is a scene from the French Revolution in which Marat has been killed by Charlotte Corday. If you were to zoom in on the letter that you can see them there, he has Charlotte Corday's name on that letter. And this is the model, actually, of the painting that sits above my desk that shows a scene from the Trojan War. The young woman who painted it used this as her model, Jacques-Louis David's The Death of Marat, dead in the bath. Napoleon crossing the Alps. He has several portraits, does David, of Napoleon, and this is the one showing him, obviously, hearkening unto the Hannibal's crossing of the Alps in the same sort of way, a heroic sort of figure. This is the coronation of Napoleon that you can see here, and Napoleon in his study. The painter, again, Jacques-Louis David, comes up quite a bit, particularly the first three paintings that we saw. So we move on to a non-European artist, and this is Hokusai. And it is his most famous in a series of paintings called 36 Views of Mount Fuji, the Great Wave off Kanagawa. And as always, you will see in those 36 views of Mount Fuji, there's Mount Fuji in the background. But this is by far, like I say, his most famous. He is a painter from the 19th century, and he is Japanese, also a woodcutter. But nevertheless, this comes up quite a bit. Now we move on to Francisco Goya. Goya is a painter of the 19th century, the first half of it in Spain. And this by far is his most famous work. It shows a fellow in the Peninsular Campaign that Napoleon waged in his European Napoleonic Wars, in which a firing squad is about to kill a man. Very often the clues will talk about a lantern on the ground lighting the scene, the yellow pants of the fellow with his arms outstretched in a somewhat Christ-like pose, and so forth and so on. But the 3rd of May, 1808, there's a companion piece of this. I forget the name of it, but it also is a date, but nevertheless an execution of some people during the Peninsular Campaign. This is the family of Charles IV by Goya, of which he was a painter, court painter, much like Velázquez was with Philip IV or Anthony van Dyck, Charles I, if I remember correctly, but oh well. And this is one of his black paintings, Saturn devouring his children. Kind of a horrifying thing that you see here. But then you have the nude Maha and the clothed Maha. The nude one was made for the Maha's husband, and the clothed one for everybody else to be able to see. And I do not include it, but there are other paintings by Goya that comes up, including the Dream of Sleep Produces Monsters. So let's go take a look at it really quickly. I think we have the time for it. So I'm just going to pop in here, Goya, and there is Francisco Goya. And so we want to find that A Dream of Sleep Produces Monsters. He painted it on the walls of the house he was living in. Hopefully he's up. Oh, there it is. Oh, The Sleep of Reason Produces Monsters. There it is. But you have kind of owls and bats and like a little cat lynx that is down here. But The Sleep of Reason Produces Monsters comes up quite a bit. And there you can see 3rd of May. And there it is. I was right. It was 2nd of May, 1808. But nowhere near as famous as what we find that's there. And I think you can find those paintings in the Prado in Madrid. But like I said, the one that I don't have is Sleep of Reason Produces Monsters. But I know that it comes up quite a bit. So let's get back to the PowerPoint. And there's the current slide. Moving on, Eugene Delacroix. Delacroix has only a couple of paintings that come up by name as a toss-up answer line, but obviously lesser-known paintings would be clues for Delacroix. And also, you have to understand that on bonuses, the more difficult paintings. So if you are trying to study art, I encourage you to go beyond what you have here. The PowerPoint assures things don't go dead. It's toss-ups usually. But if you want to be able to 30 bonuses and things like that, this is his Massacre at Chios that you can see here during, I don't know which war, but maybe the War of Greek Independence, but I could be wrong in that. Also 19th century. The Death of Sardanapalus that you see here shows a harem, and one of them obviously going to be put to death by Delacroix. And by far, this would be a toss-up answer line. Liberty leading the people. We talk about a fellow holding a musket and the dead fellow down here. And it would be describing, obviously, all sorts of things. Notre Dame in the background over here. But Liberty has personified leading the people holding the tricolor, the French flag, and it's called the tricolor because of the three colors that obviously it has. But this would be by far the most famous of the paintings. These might come up as a toss-up at the higher levels, but they would be more so clues with Delacroix being the answer line, whereas this would be the answer line in and of itself of a toss-up. Now we go to Thomas Cole and the Hudson River School, so called because they were quite fond of painting landscapes of the Hudson River Valley that you can find in New York. Thomas Cole is by far the leading member of the Hudson River School. You also have others like Frederick Church, I think his name is, as well as others. So let's go take a look at it, just to make sure that we have it covered all the way up to the back. And Hudson River School. And there it is. So you have for Thomas Cole the Oxbow, a view from Mount Holyoke that is there. So there you can see it. Here is, of course, a view of Two Lakes and Mountain House. There it is. Yes, Frederick Edwin Church, Niagara Falls, 1857, and so forth and so on, all a part of these. Asher Durand at the Catskills is also a member of the Hudson River School. So there it is. Make sure that you're familiar, but Thomas Cole is usually the one that comes up quite a bit, the most, as it were. It would be good to obviously be familiar somewhat with Durand particularly, and Frederick Church as others. But nevertheless, go and look it up in various Quizbowl questions and see how often those other artists come up and how much you need to spend time to make sure that you are familiar with them and so forth and so on. But it's the Hudson River Valley, the Catskill Mountains, the Adirondack Mountains, and the White Mountains, all of which are in New England, most of which are in New York. So going back to the PowerPoint, let's continue. And so now we have Gustave Courbet, a realist painter from France, and his work that comes up by far the most is Burial at Ornans. Burial at Ornans, which you can see is here, Courbet. Moves on to Damier, Honoré Damier. He just merely comes up sometimes, go and look him up if necessary. But if I don't have necessarily a painting for him, that means that most likely he doesn't have a painting that would come up as a toss-up answer line. This is probably Damier going to be a hard part of a bonus, or at the very highest levels of Quizbowl, at the high school level, like national championship, might he come up. But we move on to Jean-Francois Millet, and he has, of course, the Gleaners, showing these women who are coming through and picking up the scraps of wheat and straw after a harvest has come through. He also has the Sower, which you can see there, someone obviously setting out with a planting, sowing seed. And now we move on to John Constable. Constable comes up quite a bit in high school Quizbowl at the regular level, and mostly for one painting more than all others. Dedham Vale will come up, as you can see here. He is a landscape artist of the English countryside, but the painting that will come up is the Haywain. This is a quite popular painting to be asked about. Of course, we all know that we have seen a painting already, the Haywain, by Hieronymus Bosch, but this is by far the more famous of the Haywain, showing a wagon carrying hay, of course, or to carry hay, being pulled up a river in the English countryside. You can see the little dog in the foreground here, little house over to the left-hand side, and other items that would be remarked upon in a toss-up, in which this is, of course, the answer line. But the Haywain comes up quite a bit. All right, move on to Theodore Géricault, and this is, of course, his massive painting. You can't really tell on these slides when you're looking at it on the screen about how big they are, but it is a huge painting. I think you find it in the Louvre, and it shows a raft of the Medusa after a shipwreck of some sort, and you find the fellow that is here waving off to presumably a ship way off in the distance. These people are destitute, as you can see, the mangled bodies all over the place. And it is obviously a very important toss-up for Eastside High School Quizbowl, because back in 2015, this was an answer given correctly by an Eastside player that I think was the singular pivotal answer to allow us to advance in the High School National Championship Tournament, which in that year was in Chicago, to get to the playoffs. It was a critical Quizbowl answer, the last toss-up of a round we were playing, and it was able to, by converting one of the bonuses thereafter, secure a victory. So nevertheless, it's important to know. And so that is our Theodore Géricault Raft of the Medusa. Now we move on to starting with Impressionism. And here is Edgar Degas. He is a painter of dancers and racehorses. That's not all what he paints, but if there is a painting involving dances, ballet dancers particularly, or racehorses like Epsom Derby, he's the one. So there you can see it at the races on the right-hand side and the dance class on the left-hand side. Lots and lots of paintings, I should say, of dancing and racehorsing. That is my favorite, however, Degas painting, the Absinthe Drinker, which you can see is a scene of common people sitting in a pub of some sort, or cafe, since it's French. And there in front of her, as she stares off into space, a glass of absinthe, the fellow smoking right next to her. And you can just see the downtrodden life and work presumably has beaten her down. And I just like this painting quite a bit. It's my favorite Degas, but there it is. Now, lastly, we have the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. This brings us to number 60 on the list, and you can read it there. It is a group that in the 19th century wanted to reject the kind of mechanistic approach that the Mannerist artists who came after Raphael and Michelangelo. Remember, Raphael dabbled in mannerism with these elongated figures, as did El Greco. And Michelangelo, you can particularly see his Mannerist style with the Last Judgment on the wall in the Sistine Chapel. But you can read it all here yourself about what they believed and how they were obviously wanting to reject that type of style. So nevertheless, they associated, as you can see down here, with John Ruskin, an English critic whose influences were driven by his religious background. Ruskin was incredibly influential as an art critic in the 19th century. But there it is. So these are the most famous Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood's paintings. You have Dante Rossetti's Proserpina that you see here holding the pomegranate, obviously in her left hand. By note, Rossetti's sister, Christina Rossetti, is the poet of Goblin Market, a poem that is rather famous and comes up in Quizbowl quite a bit. You have John Millet's Ophelia. Ophelia is a character from Hamlet who is rejected by Hamlet and commits suicide by drowning herself. She is the daughter of Laertes and sister of Polonius, but Ophelia. And then over here you have William Holman Hunt's The Hireling's Shepherd. So over here, these are the paintings that are the most famous that come up for the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. So that's it for that 15 installment. Hopefully you are wanting to study and learn more and go beyond just this bare minimum. This one was only 15 minutes long, so it seems as though it might have worked out. Nevertheless, I encourage you, keep studying, keep getting better, and go like I do and go to Wikipedia and see what else is out there. And then, of course, always you can go to QB Reader, put stuff in there, see what's happening. And, of course, then go to my website, that is my Google Drive, and access all the NAQT questions that we have there. So, nevertheless, good luck, keep studying, and thanks.